Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. We are less than 6 months away from my favorite holiday, Halloween. So I thought today we could do some half-a-ween Halloween DIYs. For this project, I picked up this cauldron at the thrift store. It definitely has quite a few imperfections and you can tell that this is handmade, but that really just makes this perfect to turn into a little witch's cauldron. Now it did have a huge crack going across the center of it and I was a little concerned that that might keep cracking, so I decided to just kind of fill in that crack that goes all the way around with some Dollar Tree spackling. It's not really going to cover this crack very good, but it is going to fill it in and hopefully keep it from cracking further. So once I got this filled in, then I just set it aside and let it dry for a couple hours. Then of course, since this is a witch's cauldron that I'm making, I wanted to paint this black, so I'm using some black chalk paint. And for now, I'm just going to do one coat of this chalk paint. I am also painting the inside and all of the bottom of this to just kind of make sure that this is nice and finished. Once that layer of paint is dry, then I'm going to be using this pretty flower mold that I got from Amazon and some of my air dry clay. I am going to be just doing this big rose part floral piece, and I'm just smushing in my air dry clay and making that mold. I did think about using one of my Halloween molds, but I kind of wanted my witch's cauldron to be elegant and kind of pretty, so I went with this floral mold just to do something different. Now to attach this mold, I'm using some wood glue and I'm just using my finger and kind of spreading it over the clay piece. I have found recently that I really like the way wood glue holds these clay pieces much better than I think the super glue, and it's also a little bit more flexible. You have some time to kind of move this around, whereas if you use super glue, it just kind of tears the clay if you try to move it around. So after the wood glue had dried, I went back in with another layer of my black chalk paint, covered that clay piece, and then did the second coat over the cauldron. And to finish it off, I went in with some European gold rub and buff and went over the flower, and then just used what was left over on the brush to go over the cauldron. I saw this little skull vase from Bed Bath & Beyond last year and wanted to recreate it, but never got around to it, so I'm doing it now. For my vase, I'm just using a Dollar Tree Hurricane. This is one of the smaller ones that they have. And initially, I thought I wanted this vase to be black, so I taped around the edges and used some of my black chalk paint and did 2 coats over this Hurricane vase. But I do end up changing my mind about the color later because I end up wanting it gold. Now to make a bulk number of skulls, I'm just using these little candy molds that I got from Amazon, and it does come in a pack of 2. So I'll have these linked below in the description box in my Amazon storefront. Now since I had to make so many, I didn't want to use air dry clay. If you are someone who likes to use resin, you could definitely choose to do that for this mold. I'm actually just using some plaster of Paris for my molds just because one, it is super cheap for a big bucket of this stuff. Also, it doesn't give off a really bad smell at all, and that was big for me. And also, it's just really easy to use. So I mixed my plaster of Paris, 2 parts plaster of Paris with 1 part of really cold water, and I mixed this in an old measuring cup, and I'm just using an old spoon and pouring this into my mold. You'll want to make sure that you have some plastic down or something because this does get pretty messy. Right now, I'm not concerned about how full the molds are. I'm just trying to make sure everything gets filled up, and then I'm just using a large craft stick to scrape that top off and get all of that excess off of there. Then I'm kind of going to shake my molds a little bit and make sure there's no air bubbles in them. And so I'm not wasting any of that plaster. I'm using what I scraped off of there to finish filling up my second mold. And this is the huge tub of plaster of Paris that I got off of Amazon. I'll have this linked in my storefront as well. But I let those molds dry for about 24 hours and then they just easily popped right out of there. I also forgot to mention though that I did wet my molds with some cold water before pouring the plaster of Paris in it. So once I had all the little skulls out of the molds, then I started using some hot glue to glue these to my vase. Now I will say that these do not stick very well with hot glue. I'm kind of just doing this for a temporary hold right now, because if I tried to use the wood glue that actually works really good with plaster of Paris, then they would just kind of slide around. So you'll see right here, I am pouring some wood glue in between all of those skulls and kind of getting it down into the back side of the skulls. When I used the hot glue, it left kind of a gap on the backside, so that wood glue is able to kind of get in behind there and really secure these. So I'm using a brush to kind of get it down in there really good in between all the little crevices between the skulls. But also I am putting this wood glue over top of those skulls as well, because wood glue helps to strengthen plaster of Paris anyway, so this worked out perfectly. And once all the wood glue was completely dry, I just took this outside and gave it 2 coats of my metallic gold spray paint. This project is the quickest and easiest one in today's video. I picked up this beautiful framed mirror at my thrift store, and as you can see, it was already pretty patinaed. I'm not sure if this was done on purpose by somebody else or if it was patinaed naturally, but it's definitely perfect to make a spooky mirror. All you'll need for this project is some frosted window cling. This is just some I had left over from Amazon, and it has this really pretty simple floral detail on it, so I thought it would be kind of neat to make a little ghost out of this. I'm just using a dry erase marker and I'm just kind of sketching out a little ghost form, then adding some eyes and a mouth. If you use a dry erase marker and draw on the shiny side, then if you mess up, you can just use some water and wipe it off of there. So I just cut out my ghost, and then I kind of folded it over a little bit to cut out his eyes and his mouth. And then I just spritzed my mirror with a little bit of water and used a little squeegee to smooth him out over top of the mirror. For this project, I found this ceramic little lady at the thrift store, and I've actually been looking for one about this size, particularly because I wanted to make a Halloween decoration with this. I'm sure all of you know how much I love Edgar Allan Poe, so I wanted to use this figurine to turn her into his wife, Virginia Clem. Now, of course, I had to spook her up just a little bit, so I am turning her into a ghost figurine, starting out out by giving her a couple coats of my white chalk paint. And if you are painting these really glossy ceramic figurines, I do highly recommend using chalk paint just because this tends to stick better to these figurines and it doesn't take as many coats. Now, to really make her look ghostly, I'm taking just the backside of a napkin and I'm gonna Mod Podge this onto her, starting at the top of her head. I'm just adding some Mod Podge pretty much all over the top portion of her, and then I'm gonna take that piece of napkin and really stick it onto her. I want her face to still kind of show through, and she's also holding a rose that I want to be able to see. So I am just kind of maneuvering that napkin where I want it and then getting my brush full of that Mod Podge and really getting this napkin onto her. So I'm just going to continue working that napkin with the Mod Podge and getting it stuck down to her. Now, once I have it stuck down to her, I let this first layer dry and then went over this entire thing, even where the napkin isn't, with another coat of the Mod Podge. Then once I had the second coat on, I'm gonna set this aside and let it completely dry. And then you don't have to worry about the napkin tearing or anything like that. It will be nice and secure against her. And this is how she looked once she was completely dry. I did consider doing a second layer of the napkin, but I kind of liked the gauzy look of it. Now, since she is supposed to be Edgar Allan Poe's wife, I have this little kind of like locket picture frame that goes on a keychain or a necklace, and I printed off a tiny little picture of Edgar Allan Poe, and I'm using just a piece of a chain necklace that I had, and I'm gonna attach this to her. But before I do that, I wanted to accent that little rose that she's holding. So I'm using some European Gold Rub and Buff and just going over the rose. Then I'm using some Mod Podge and covering that little necklace piece and adding in Edgar Allan Poe's photo. Then I will just smooth this out really good and go over it with another thin layer of Mod Podge. Then to finish her off, I am just attaching that piece of chain necklace and adding the little photo of Edgar Allan Poe, and I added it right down in her arm. And that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed these HALF-O-WEEN Halloween DIYs. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.